Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome into the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon. I'm alongside Glen West as we talk for the second straight week, Glen, baseball. And it's going to be a conversation that, as soon as we start having these podcasts, the baseball team's just kind of causing some concern for the fan base. So maybe we should pivot and not do another one. Maybe we're the problem. But we'll see as we talk today. A series against Mississippi State, and if you're listening, make sure to subscribe. If you're watching, make sure to subscribe if you like LSU baseball. Glenn, a series against Mississippi State that coming in off the road against Auburn, which I think as much as you wanted to beat Auburn on the road, they're just really hot right now. Auburn, defending home, played well. LSU really didn't play all that well. You said, okay, let's get reset. And it felt like the perfect storm to kind of reset against Mississippi State team that really hasn't been great all year. But, Glenn, it's still a team with a good amount of talent. And on this weekend, Friday night, you get schemes, you get the offensive outbursts. But, man, and we'll just start right here, the bullpen was an issue all weekend long, Glenn. So how much of a concern is it going forward? And what did you see this weekend that may cause some concern for postseason hopes and dreams?
Yeah, I think we're certainly in a position now where you have to kind of reevaluate and reanalyze just kind of the long-term outlook of this team because, up until 2 weeks ago, the bullpen hadn't been great. It hadn't been what it's been the last 2 weeks, but it hadn't been just really helping you really win games either. So, but LSU was winning these series for most of this year. They were the number one team for 12 straight weeks for a reason, and that's because they didn't lose back-to-back games. And now, what you've seen here over the last couple weeks is LSU start to drop some of these games. And just point blank period. Number one is the bullpen. That's the number one reason why LSU lost that game on Saturday against Mississippi State. It's why they lost the game yesterday on Sunday against Mississippi State, and it's why they lost a couple of the games at Auburn as well. It's just not been very good the last 2 weeks for this group. We'll dive into a little bit more of the details here throughout the pod, but just the sweeping overall takeaway I had from this series is that this is troubling. This is very troubling. I think if you're looking at LSU as a deep postseason contender, because they quite literally, outside of the three starts they had from Paul Skeens, from Ty Floyd, and from Javen Coleman, nobody on this pitching staff executed and delivered the way that you'd hope that they would to help LSU win these games. And so it's very troubling. It's very I think it's probably reached its lowest point. You'd hope to think it's reached its lowest point. But yeah, they have got to do some serious internal just reevaluation here of how they can best piece this thing together, because you could really tell it's going to be a huge storyline once postseason play comes along, just how they're going to be able to deal with this, because it is a massive, massive issue on this team.
Yeah, and when you get to postseason baseball, look, everybody's good. And LSU fans have found that out over the past couple of years as well. I think, too, Glenn, in the sense of, reevaluating, it was one of those things that I remember talking with Jay Johnson after the game Sunday on last Sunday against Auburn. And I will say this, should give comfort to LSU fans. He didn't want to elicit an emotional response. And when the question was asked, what did you just tell your team? He said, you know what? We just said, hey, let's just get home and let's reevaluate things. So he's not going to make an emotional move. I think that's a great trait to have. You have to have it in the sport of baseball. But, Glenn, when you look at kind of the starter, and that was a conversation that, you had an article on, I had an article on last week for Sunday, it wasn't the starting. And the starting pitching, you felt like you got in there. And to kind of going back to Sunday, Coleman went 2 2/3. He gave up 1 run. He walked 3. He struck out 5. But, you felt like with the offense, and especially if I'm looking at the box score correctly here, you score 3 in the second, 2 in the third, 5 in the fourth, and 3 in the fifth. We've mentioned all season long it's an offense that can score in bunches. But for the bullpen to turn it over, and especially to a guy in Gavin Guidry who, was pretty solid in a blowout, loss on Sunday against Auburn the week before, I think when you look at this bullpen, it's a problem. And you know that the margin of error is going to be very slim when you get to Hoover, when you get to a regional, a potential super regional, if you want to advance that far. So where do you think Jay Johnson, and you'll obviously learn more in the press conferences this week, where do you think Jay Johnson's sitting right now? Like, how do you reevaluate this? And sometimes it looks like a defeated walk to the mound. I mean, a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, no, it certainly did at times. I mean, as you know, Auburn was, or as Mississippi State was putting up those 9 runs in 2 innings, and LSU was mowing through their bullpen. I mean, they went through probably 6 or 7 guys in a 2 inning stretch, just trying to find something that worked. You could see Jay Johnson in the bullpen or in the dugout, just really scratching his head, looking back at Wes Johnson and them trying to really piece together what the thought process here of trying to get outs. I mean, it got to a point where, I mean, LSU took a 13-4 lead. And as soon as they took that 13-4 lead, Mississippi State comes out with a 3-run homer, and you were like, oh man, it's only a matter of time before this thing gets really ugly. And it got ugly really quickly. The leashes were short on some of these guys, and I don't blame you can't blame the pitching the coaching staff at all for that. I mean, you just got to be able to execute. I think
Yeah.
the biggest takeaway that I had is that these guys just do not have a lot of confidence right now out of the bullpen, and um, that's just to put it, I guess, in the best way possible for them. But they just, all of them really struggled to find the strike zone for one, and then number two, they were getting hit hard. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
these guys were getting hit hard, and it was not. And it was just a variety of different things that really hurt the staff this weekend. And look, I think that if since we're just kind of going down this hill already, the 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 one part about this weekend that you felt really good about is that LSU got a complete game from Paul Skeens on Friday. They got 6 innings of Ty Floyd at practically his best this season in 1 run baseball from him. They got halfway through this series with only using 2 pitchers, and it didn't make a difference. That is I think the worst part about this weekend is that you put yourself in a really great position to use the bullpen the best way possible these final 2 games. And the guys just didn't deliver. And that was kind of the common message from Jay Johnson after the game. Yeah, he mentioned a lot of these guys were feeling fatigued. It's late in the season. He didn't want to use excuses, but that was part of his answer to one of the questions about the bullpen. He, blatantly said, like, some of the situations these guys are in are just not responding, in terms of having guys on base and who to throw out there with guys on base, who to throw out there with a bases loaded situation, with a 1 out, with a 2 outs. I mean, all this stuff goes really detailed for the coaching staff on who they feel most comfortable throwing out there. And it just didn't matter. It didn't matter this weekend because really, quite literally, nobody stepped up to the mound and delivered for them outside of maybe 1 2/3 innings from Riley Cooper on Sunday, which, I mean, LSU had a chance to walk it off in the bottom of the 9th offensively. There was probably a little bit of a, just kind of a questionable decision there on, why bunt Ben DePolt and take Gavin Dugast out of the game. Jay talked about it after the game. He said that they felt really comfortable with that decision, and that quite literally the only thing that could have happened, that could have prevented LSU from winning that game, happened. And it is what it is. I mean, the bullpen should have never put LSU in that position to be, losing that game 14-13 when you had the 13-4 lead. And you got to go back to the groundwork here. I mean, we're going to talk with Johnson, I think, here on Monday afternoon. So by the time most of you are probably listening to this, it'll be, we'll probably have some more information about how LSU is going to approach things going forward. But yeah, I mean, look, they replaced they replaced the Sunday starter. I thought Javen Coleman did a nice job as the Sunday starter. But I mean, when you have to use 9 relief pitchers over a 3 or 4 inning stretch because nobody can get an out, um, it's very troubling and certainly something that LSU is going to have to really overcome here before the end of before postseason play begins.
Yeah, kind of going into that stretch. It started with Christian Little. He got recorded 1 out. Blake Money came in, finished the inning, got an inning in the third. Ackenhausen didn't record an out. Bryce Collins comes in, he gets 2 outs, and then Sam Dutton gets 1 out. But that is a span of 5 pitchers over that 2 inning span. I mean, that's just not. It's not sustainable, when you get against. And the thing is, too, and this is no knock against Mississippi State. I sit in the camp of saying people, people say, well, we didn't play our best, but Mississippi State took advantage, and they took advantage of that, and so you have to give them credit. There's another team on the other side of the field trying to execute as well, and the Mississippi State did that in situations. But you have to wonder too, Glenn, and I think it gets into the mental psyche too, because I asked Trey Morgan this question last Friday night against Auburn. And I said, when you got a guy like Paul Skeens on the mound and he's dealing, what does it do for an offense? And, he gave the good answer of, you feel confident, you feel good. The question that I don't think anyone's going to ask, and it's because no one's going to throw anybody under the bus, but you have to think about it, and I think fans are thinking about it, the other side. When this offense sees they put up 13 runs and they're losing, I mean, the mental psyche, that has to wear down, especially when you get later innings. So, Glenn, how much pressure do you think the offense felt on a Saturday and a Sunday, having to come from behind, having to try to mount a comeback when, they said, hey, this should be enough to win a game?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was a question that I had for Jay Johnson afterwards, which was kind of how I mean you've talked so much this season about how this team is just really locked in mentally and how they these players really know how to respond well to adversity. And he essentially told me last night or yesterday he doesn't have to worry about the person component with these players. They have to worry about the play, and the person part of it is that these guys will get themselves mentally right, at least from an offensive perspective. I can't back that statement up from what we saw out of the bullpen the last couple weekends, because clearly something's not right confidence wise with some of these guys. But from an offensive perspective, for sure, you can expect LSU to bounce back. I mean, look, they didn't even need to be in a position to bounce back there late in the game. They shouldn't have never been in that position to where they had to potentially walk it off in the 9th inning and just didn't convert. They did enough to win the game in the middle part of the game. From an outsider's perspective, this was solely on the bullpen, in my opinion. I don't know how you can look at it any other way. Of course, Jay Johnson and anybody in that program is not going to throw the bullpen under the bus. But that's just the way that it was. I mean, you score 13 runs and you have a 9-run lead. You're practically on the verge of a run rule kind of game there. And guys just can't get outs on the mound. And look, the offense did kind of go through a stretch there at the end where they didn't score, I don't think, in the last 5 innings of the game. As the lead tightened and shrunk, you could tell that there were some struggles there, I think, with the offense in terms of just getting guys in, and they got on base. They were able to get guys on base. They just weren't able to get some of those runs in. And yeah, it cost them. I mean, they had a bases loaded situation in the bottom of the 9th. It was just a really, you had the ideal situation coming up. You had a leadoff walk, I believe, to Josh Pearson. You had, and then you bunt Nipholt instead of putting Gavin Dugas in there. And then Trey Morgan, who was just on absolute fire, rockets one out to right center field. It just doesn't drop. And then Mississippi State walks Dylan Cruz. It walks Tommy White intentionally to load the bases with 2 outs, and you had a chance to get a run in there. Alex Milazzo just couldn't punch it in there in the bottom of the 9th, and things just couldn't get going there at the end of the game for LSU's offense. But they did enough to win the game. They did enough to win the series. I think it was really positive that after Dylan Cruz had a 2 for 21 stretch over the last week or so, he came out and went 3 for 4 on Sunday. I think that's a really great sign for this offense because you're going to need those guys to really carry you through this season. It really looks like. I mean, that was just kind of the sweeping takeaway. Also, is that if this bullpen's not going to help you out, this offense is really going to feel a lot of pressure going forward. And I think that having all those guys clicking on the same cylinder is going to be really LSU's best path of making a deep postseason run at this point.
Yeah, you were right. After the fifth inning, which they put up 3 runs, they did not score again. So 6, 7, 8, 9 in the bottom of the 10th. LSU couldn't push anything across. But like you said, more on the bullpen in this. And Glenn, kind of following up on that psyche, I mean, you look ahead for what LSU has, okay? They're going to, play McNeese on Tuesday night. And then they head to Athens to a Georgia team that kind of found themselves during the middle of the SEC slate. And we say this, I mean, look, there's no easy path in the SEC. Jay Johnson said it. He said it multiple times this year as he's kind of, his second year, he's visited everywhere, it kind of feels like, and gone different places. I often laugh because when a big team, and we'll take it to the football reference, when a big team in football loses, a big brand, they often say that next opponent is the whipping boy. So McNeese is coming into Alex Box. You talk about roles. Nobody's comfortable in the bullpen. I mean, how important, though, is this midweek game for some guys just to kind of find any ounce of confidence heading into a road series at Georgia, which feels like, not that you're in danger of missing the postseason or anything like that, but you never want to backpedal into postseason play. And so it's really important that they win in Athens. But how important is this midweek game?
Yeah, very important. I mean, you're going to see a lot of bullpen arms throwing in this game. I mean, a lot of these guys didn't have long extended outings. I mean, you just kind of went through the list here of about 5 or 6 guys that didn't even really record an out, had a couple outs here and there. But you've got to find a way to get somebody some kind of confidence. Thatcher Hurd looked really good for a couple weeks there. 3 or 4 outings in a row, he really strung together, and then just didn't have it on Saturday. And I think that he's going to be a guy you see a lot on Tuesday. I think you're going to see certainly Griffin Herring, Christian Little, a lot of these guys that maybe had maybe 10 or fewer pitches in that game on Sunday. I would imagine you see Ackenhausen, and you probably see Sam Dutton at some point, and maybe even Gavin Guidry. I mean, I think they have to throw a lot of guys out there and see what sticks and see if they need to change up the situation that they're putting these guys in. Like, Guidry has been, I think when Guidry's been at his best this year, it's been as a closer, getting the final 4 or 5 outs of a game. I think that's been his strength. Maybe you go back to that this weekend for him in a tight game against Georgia. Maybe he's not the first guy you pull out of the bullpen like he did on Sunday, and just wasn't able to kind of go very deep into that outing. Do you switch things up with Griffin Herring? Do you put him back as the kind of the first guy out of the bullpen on Friday, and maybe get you deep into an outing if Paul Skeens can't get you through 6 or 7? I mean, like there's some stuff here that you've got to really go back and look at in terms of putting these guys in the best situations possible for them to have success. And it's tough. I mean, it's tough when quite literally nobody had success this weekend out of the bullpen. It's tough to know what those situations are on the outside, but certainly I think on the inside, LSU has a good understanding of what the best outing has been for those pitchers this year, and making sure that they're being thrown into those types of situations is the best possible way I think you can kind of look at this going forward. I mean, there's no doubt this was a setback. This was not a step forward here. I think you can certainly make the argument that LSU is, kind of not playing its best ball. I think they're probably playing their worst ball of the season here as the regular season comes to a close. That's not good. You've got to get some kind of positive momentum, some kind of positive track. this final week of the regular season, and certainly in Hoover next weekend when you kind of get to mimic a little bit more of the postseason play and just kind of how you use arms, how you
Mhm.
utilize those matchups. Will be very interesting over the next week and even into Hoover how they kind of manage these situations, because it's certainly not looking certainly not been LSU's best effort, I don't think, the last couple weeks.
Yeah, LSU drops to number 5 in the rankings, and obviously fans are going to be upset about that. But at this point, like you said, the focus needs to be having a good weekend. And I'm not saying a perfect weekend. I mean, look, it'd be great to go 4-0 the next 4 games. But you're walking into Athens, and just looked this up because I knew Georgia had kind of turned things around when I watched them back in April, and they had swept Arkansas. Arkansas came to Athens. But then from then on out, they play Ole Miss. They lose the series to Ole Miss. They then beat Tennessee in a series, and then they just come off a road series at Missouri as they get swept. So it's really a Jekyll and Hyde team over in Athens that you don't know what you're going to get. And so I think it's really important to see what LSU can do. And,
Yeah,
and like you said, get all the momentum possible before heading into that. And Glenn,
you
one
could
last
make
question
that
before we
argument
wrap it
about
up.
LSU right now too. I mean, like
Exactly.
that. I mean, you come out in your LSU and you kind of win your first 6-7 SEC series against top 10, top 15, top 5 opponents, and you're feeling really good about yourself with the wins over Tennessee and Arkansas and Alabama and Kentucky, all these teams that are fighting for NCAA tournament spots. And then you lose to arguably the 2 worst teams in the conference this year in Ole Miss and Mississippi State back to back, or no, not Ole Miss, in
Auburn.
Auburn and Mississippi State in back to back weekends. And so, yeah, I mean, look, it's just the ebbs and flows of a college baseball season. I think if you're LSU, that primary concern has got to be figuring out roles for these bullpen pitchers that they can really have success in. And I think you also have to hope that Paul Skeens and Ty Floyd can get you as deep into these outings as possible. I mean, that's a given, because I think it worked out perfectly for LSU this weekend in terms of not putting the pressure on the bullpen. But those guys just didn't respond and just didn't
Yeah.
execute. So I know we're going around in circles there, but that's that's got to be the biggest takeaway here heading into the final week of the regular season.
It'll be interesting to see how they handle it, the mental psyche of things. Glenn will have everything that Jay Johnson says today as well. So make sure that is a good reason to make sure you tune into the website. Tune in to Glenn on Twitter. You see his Twitter right there. He'll be kind of live tweeting some of those comments. Probably one of the more interesting press conferences that we've had in the past, I would say, the whole season, really, to kind of see what this team can do as they kind of need to turn things around. And Glenn, it's such a fine line. Baseball's a funny sport. Things can go your way, and you can do everything right, and it still doesn't go your way. So we'll see how they kind of handle things down the stretch. But hey, my name is Bryce Koon. He is Glen West. We thank you so much for tuning in. Whether it's on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button. Leave a comment as well. What do you think about LSU baseball? Do they have what it takes to make the stretch run and really kind of garner and recapture some of that magic they had early in the year? Or do you think elsewhere? If you're listening on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast, we want to thank you as well. And a big thank you as well if you're on YouTube. Back to that. You got us to 3,000 subscribers. We really appreciate that. That is some fantastic work that the entire team has been doing. We feel like we're up in the content and can't wait. Glenn, I just joked with you, man. I got like 3 boxes right here that I got to pack as soon as I get this podcast uploaded. So, man, we're rocking and rolling, getting closer to being down in Baton Rouge, and can't wait to join you guys and for what's going to be a fun time and a fun new adventure.
Yep, we're excited to have you, Bryce. Can't wait to get you down here for sure.
Awesome. Well, this is Go 24/7 Podcast. We'll see you next time. Make sure to tune in on all social media over at the website as well, where you will not miss any of the content that we have coming at. We'll see you next time.